Most often when we're in that triggered reaction space, a survival mode response, it's all systems go just for survival. We're not able to call upon our critical thinking or our neutral perspectives. We are just focused, unconsciously basically on surviving. And so first things first, we need to be able to move through that initial reaction and through that survival mode response so that we can get those critical thinking skills back on board and really get to the heart of what's going on underneath.
Welcome back to the Awakening Her podcast. In this episode, I am sitting down with Christy Holt. Christy is a self-proclaimed happiness hussy, adventure guide, podcast host, and international best-selling author on a mission to spread happiness around the planet. Christy's mentorship helps her clients to create a life that they love, full of healthy, loving relationships, and one that makes them truly happy. So in this episode, we are talking about navigating conflicts with grace. And I ask questions about romantic relationships, family members, children, and basically everyone else in our life that we may from time to time have some conflict with. So I love Christy's approach to everything we're going to talk about. She drops some truth bombs, some really tangible tips on how to navigate when we have challenges, disagreements, arguments, and how to navigate these things with grace so that we can have better outcomes, authentic relationships, be able to share our truth, and so on. So I know you're going to love this episode. Without further ado, let's dive in and welcome Christy onto the show. Hello, Christy. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited you're here. How you doing?
Thank you so much. I am so pumped to be here too. I'm really excited for this conversation, and I don't totally know exactly where all we're going to go, but I know it is going to be packed with so many juicy nuggets.
Yes, definitely. Just in our few minutes of talking before we hit record, I just know that this is going to be such a real conversation. Everyone get your, your real talk pants on because this is going to be so good. We are talking about first and foremost, navigating conflict and communication and all of that with as much grace as possible. Mm-hmm. And I know because we are all in this room here committed to self-growth and moving forward, we really want to learn, please, help us all solve all of our problems. Let us know the keys to navigating relationships and dynamics and conflicts and emotions. And a lot of us here are either parents, partners, we're obviously interacting with coworkers and clients and people all the time. So this is going to be such a great conversation. I know I personally have so many questions. I'll try not to dominate it, but it can be really tough. So thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited for this and everything else that we're going to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. And with no further ado, let's dive in, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it. So maybe let everyone know first and foremost who you are, where you are, a little bit about your business, do all that good foreplay stuff.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'm Christy Holt, and I call myself the Happiness Hussy. I call myself that because I am on a mission to spread happiness all across the world to as many people as possible. I do believe that happiness is our intended state, and that if we can get to a state of self-mastery, we can live in a state of happiness, peace, joy, love, whatever label you want to use for it, almost all of the time. Now, we are human. So we're fallible, and we are also capable of feeling a complex range of emotions, which makes this whole adventure that much more interesting, right? So, this isn't about achieving some perfect enlightenment stage. It's about humaning in a real way, right? A real authentic way. And I started my mission basically coming out of a relationship that was very unhealthy, and I was very unhappy. I felt super stuck, super hopeless and hopeless. And I really, thank God, had this moment, this holy shit moment where I realized I'm the common denominator in all of my problems. And this self-awareness really shifted things for me. At first, I was like, oh my God, I'm the problem. But then I also realized I'm the solution too. And so when I started to really lean more into self-discovery and, increasing my own self-awareness, I really started to see that the patterns that I had been exhibiting prior to that were not helpful, right? I'm talking about blame. I'm talking about complaining, venting. I'm talking about striving for perfectionism, talking about striving to please other people and keep other people happy around me. And this for me was inside my marriage, but for so many people, it can affect all areas of life, right? People pleasing can really affect life, business, just interacting with the world at all. And so I really started to move through these patterns and really start to shed them, because the truth was they were not helping me. And the more I came back to myself, the more I realized I am love. That is who I am at my core, and the rest of it was mere illusion and distraction from this intended state, this essence that I am. And so I really started to go down a road of self-discovery, of increasing my self-awareness, which kind of led me to this place. Now, I did end up leaving that relationship. I realized after doing a little bit of self exploration that it really wasn't a fit for me to remain in that relationship. It had absolutely, gone its course. It was done. It wasn't working for me, honestly, in reflection. I don't know if it ever was, but everything is a lesson, right? So would I turn back the clock and not do it? Absolutely not. I would do it all again, because it made me who I am today, gave me the wisdom and understanding that I now have, and the ability to help people navigate these situations. So I left the relationship, and this miraculous thing happened. I actually totally manifested the man of my dreams. Like a hot minute actually after I left my relationship. Like the divorce papers were not even final, and I found this incredible human who literally checked all the boxes. I will clarify here. The boxes were not like tall, dark, and handsome. They were ways that I was going to experience relationship with someone to laugh with, someone to experience passion, have experience passionate moments with, to be able to tell my deepest thoughts to and not be judged. It was those kind of things that I put onto my list at that point in time. And so I'm so, so grateful that the universe provided exactly in the perfect divine timing. And here we are. So we are celebrating almost 6 years together. We haven't had a fight yet. Now, that's not to say we haven't had conflict, because we're two separate human beings. And so we are going to see things differently from time to time. And so there are some crucial skills, which I hope to be able to share throughout this conversation, that can really help you to navigate and communicate in a way that serves your intentions and your purpose for your relationships, not just your romantic ones, but truly these skills will help you across all areas.
I love that so much. And I love how you say, like, we've never had a fight. And of course, any two people, like you said, you're going to have to navigate stuff. There's going to be
Yeah.
times you're irritated or they misunderstood you or whatever happens. But I can really relate to that. And me and my husband have been together 12 years. We've known each other since we were 14. And I would say the same thing, is we've never had a fight. We've never raised our voices, yelling at each other, calling each other names, that type of thing. There are definitely dense moments. And even times when I'm like, I need a day or two of space to kind of just process what I'm trying to say here or what I'm feeling. That's fine. But we don't in that way fight. I have a long way to go and so many questions to ask you about communication. It's not, necessarily my zone of genius, but there is that level of like, I'm not going to call you an asshole. I'm not going to throw things at you. I have compassion for everybody and everybody's experiences and what has led them to places where that has happened. There's no judgment. It's just about maybe reframing it into, one where we're trying to come to a solution here. We're trying to connect in the middle rather than just trying to necessarily fight or win or whatever. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on that. But I just first wanted to say, I think it's so cool in telling your story, that moment of like, wait, I'm the common denominator. And, a lot of us have that moment, and it's not blame. It's not, I think in self-development, it's like, take responsibility kind of means like shit all over yourself and be like, you're the problem. But you also said, I'm the opportunity. And that's the part it gave me goosebumps, because there is this common denominator, but also it's your brain too. It's your filtering system. As long as you're thinking the same thoughts and reacting the same way, and, often letting our reactions, our wounds, whatever lead, then we are the common denominator. But it also comes from, I'm the common opportunity as well. And as I shift who I'm being, everything in my life changes. As you shift the way you're being, as you shift the way you see things, your life changes. And so there is that two sides of the same coin, right? You're the problem, but you're also the opportunity as well.
And I mean, looking at that, if you take the approach like I do, that everyone is doing the best that they can with the resources and understanding that they have, this allows you to give yourself that compassion and that grace. Because, yeah, of course you can look back. Hindsight's 20 fucking 20. But when you're in the moment, I have no doubt that everyone is doing the best that they can with what they have in that moment. It's so much easier to look back. And this is why we end up guilting and shaming ourselves, because later we see, oh, I could have done that differently. Or maybe there's this better, quote unquote, better pathway. I would argue that there's nothing really better or worse or good or bad or anything either, but that's a whole nother conversation. But giving yourself the grace to say like, hey, you know what? That's the choice that I made. And either I got the intended result or I learned something. And neither of those is a loss in any way, shape, or form. So if we can take that and apply that not only to ourselves, but to other people, we can really start to develop this lens of love and compassion, which really gives us a massive leg up on the communication. Because if we're not defensive or attacking, we can actually have productive conversations that results in the intended outcomes rather than getting sidelined by our emotional triggers or, whatever else might be going on under the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a brilliant friend that's been a life coach since before it was cool. And she's so good. And at one time she said to me, relationships is kind of her specialty. And she said, relationships so often the wounds are dancing. You're not really fighting about the toilet seat or the blah, blah, blah. It's the wounds dancing. And at that time I was like, because I hadn't gotten into the healing work, the inner child work, really any of the trauma healing stuff and understanding that type of thing. But now I start to notice that the farther in I get and I have that awareness of when I am being defensive, shutting down, reacting. And I'm not going to say overreacting because that is judgment. But when I react in a way that's slightly disproportionate or seems a little bit like, what's really going on here?
Yeah.
And then you can ignite that and evoke that in the other person who has wounds as well, because, we're human. And then it's almost just that starts dancing and we're not really getting to be productive or getting anything sort of accomplished in that space. But yeah, I love even just how you're pointing to that. And we're always discovering like what works, what doesn't work, what feels good, what doesn't feel good. So in the past, there is no reason to shame ourselves. We just learn and we grow and we move forward. But I'd love to hear your take on that, like how it's kind of often when we're fighting, especially if it's a lover or someone really close to us, even maybe family members, right? How it can be our wounds, our defense mechanisms that are truly dancing, and how we start to even bring that into awareness and then, of course, move through that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, everything that we experience in our external world is a reflection of what's within ourselves, right? So often we experience an emotional trigger, and you can call that an activation or just a big emotional reaction, whatever you'd like to use for words, doesn't really matter. We're pointing to the same thing. But if something is coming up that's really uncomfortable, often people will resist it and shove it away, and they don't want to feel it because it's uncomfortable. But the truth is, it's highlighting something for you. It's a signpost. It's something for you to observe within you. And it wouldn't be coming up if you weren't ready to look at it. So it takes this conscious effort to not shove it away and not resist or avoid it, but to say like, hey, what actually is coming up for me? Like, this is maybe a bit of a disproportionate response to what's actually going on. And it's not about the toilet seat. It's not about the toothpaste in the sink. It's not about the socks on the floor. What's actually coming up? And generally what that actually points back to is a need that's unmet within you. And so I know you got an advanced audience. So hopefully they're a little bit able to start recognizing those needs within themselves, because often when we're in this emotional, triggered reaction, we're not seeing clearly. So a few steps need to maybe happen, and nothing's linear because that's how this is. But most often when we're in that triggered reaction space, a survival mode response, it's all systems go just for survival. We're not able to call upon our critical thinking or our neutral perspectives. We are just focused, unconsciously, basically, on surviving. And so first things first, we need to be able to move through that initial reaction and through that survival mode response so that we can get those critical thinking skills back on board and really get to the heart of what's going on underneath. Now, there's a lot of different ways to regulate your nervous system and to get yourself through these difficult emotions without bypassing them, because we really don't want to avoid, because what we resist persists, as they say. And the more we try and stuff and avoid those emotions, the more that shit comes out sideways. And then we're like, what is going on? Right? This is why the toothpaste evokes a massive response, because, well, it's not about that, but there's other stuff being unearthed attached to that same unmet need. So if we can start to regulate the nervous system, there are so many tools out there and modalities out there to regulate your nervous system. But to give a couple of really very simple ones that you can do in moments: breath, shaking or moving your body, or just taking a moment to create some mindfulness, meditation. These things can be done within 5 minutes. Some of the breath, like 30 to 90 seconds, will help you to move through that. And the goal there is actually, there's no real goal. It is just to be with yourself in that moment and to hold yourself, right? A lot of people think, oh, I'm trying to clear my mind. I'm trying to, move out of this discomfort. The more you try to do that, the more you're probably going to remain focused on those things, right? Staying focused on the problem. And so instead, just allowing yourself to be here now with this. I promise we've all been through difficult emotions, and we've all survived lots of difficult emotions in the past. All we have to do is remind ourselves that we can do difficult things and allow ourselves to sit with it. The tricky part is to not spiral into the story and create an identity and create a whole schwack of judgments and assumptions on yourself, right? That's where that guilt and that shame starts piling on. But if we can allow ourselves, if we can allow ourselves just to be for a moment until things start calming down, then guess what? The blinders come off. We can start using those critical thinking skills. They'll come back on board, and we can apply that lens of love and compassion, creating with intention, right? Consciously choosing how we wish to respond rather than automatic reacting to the situation. And that really is just us standing in our power, taking our power to communicate into our own hands.
Yeah. And it is in those momentary places. And, for all of us equally, that is tough. And there's times when I'm connecting with Source, or I'm, really kind of seeing the way that life works, and they go like, yeah, that is hard. Like, it's the hardest part about being human is managing our emotions. Yes. So it's not like it's just easy for Christy and it's hard for you. And, she's on some pedestal. It's like, no, in those moments of reaction, that's always the hardest place. And that's where the tools come in. That's where the awareness starts to come in. And I love that you say that. The first entire goal is just to become aware of it and to hold yourself in that. I agree fully. So, okay. So say we're in a moment, and I'm just going to use an example. We're talking about toothpaste in the sink. So I'm going to assume, maybe husband and wife, just for this situation. And, she goes in, and again, there's like toothpaste in the sink, which is usually a problem with kids, not as much with men. Maybe it is, but anyways, and we see the cap off or whatever it is. And like, that's it. And so say, a lot of my audience, everybody listening, we're fairly self-aware, and maybe we take a minute, we take a breath, and it's like, what's really going on here? And then we start to hear or sense, I feel unheard. So I've asked him 17 times to do the thing. Okay. So now we've pinpointed that I feel unheard here. What can we start to do? Because that is that place. And I even notice family members or different things where I'm like, ooh, this is tapping on feeling unseen, feeling unheard, needs not being met, as you said. So once we, in that situation, go like, it's not really the toothpaste. It's the fact that I always fucking ask him and he never, does this. And one more time, and I feel invisible or whatever. So once we have that, where do we kind of take it from there so that we're not just like, listen, Brent, you got it. Like, I've said this so many times, and we just kind of explode. Yeah. How do we translate that into getting our needs met or communicating our needs, or what's even one way we can start that?
Well, I would say that with any kind of personal development or growth, it's actually really important to practice these skills and develop the tools outside of those moments, right? Because we are not fully on on the critical thinking when we're in emotional turmoil. So developing the skills, practicing the skills outside of the emotionally reactive instances will help you to develop them. And then that will make it easier to call upon them when you are in those situations, right? Take deep breaths, remember my skills. Okay, I'm going to look at this and approach this with intention, right? Moving forward consciously. And I think that if we can do that and get to that space, we can really choose how we want the conversation to go and really approach it from what is the outcome that I would like to, like the ideal outcome of this conversation, and approach it with that in mind, right? Approaching it with the end in mind. Because oftentimes we don't do that. We go in like guns ablaze and like, they need to hear me once and for all. And I'm so frustrated and they're not hearing me. And honestly, if you go in like that, they're probably not going to hear you, right? So, and they're probably actually going to also end up being defensive, because when we're in attack mode, it creates this defensive situation. Or if we're feeling defensive, we're likely to create and manifest an attack, right? It's just the energetics of it. And so going in with an intention of maintaining connection, right? Having both of our needs met, coming to win-win solutions. If we can go in, that allows us to don that lens of love and compassion and create those outcomes that we actually want, rather than just kind of willy-nilly spewing whatever is going on inside of our mind at the moment. It just gives us an opportunity to plan and prepare. And those couple of deep breaths maybe that we're taking, right, to calm or regulate our nervous system, can be our opportunity to plan as well. So we can like pause, breathe, and plan. What do I want to create? What outcomes do I want to have here? And, you know, I'm sure everybody has heard, we want to really lead with your feelings. And that can be tricky too. There's a lot of complicated language around our feelings and expressing our feelings. And honestly, we should be taught more of this in school, but we're not. We're taught to fit inside of boxes and to keep our big emotions small so they don't make anyone else uncomfortable. And there's also this piece of this where we need to find the balance between our fullest, most authentic expression and balancing that with, you know, not being overly responsible for other people's reactions and responses or their emotions. And it's tricky. Like, I think this is like a lifetime journey of really navigating this. And some people you're going to find that flows more easily with, and other people, it's going to be like butting heads no matter what you say. So it's really getting clear for yourself, right? Because ultimately you're not responsible for anyone else's emotional response. Now, that's not to say that you're not going to care, right? Like, you can care about it, but not take the responsibility for it, because ultimately you can't control anyone else. You can't control their reaction, but what you can do is control yourself and how you are showing up, the language that you're using, and, you know, avoiding being quote unquote nice, which actually means pleasing and agreeable, and instead being kind, which involves unconditional kindness for not just the other person, but for you as well. Authentic expression is part of unconditional love. Like, you literally can't have unconditional love without authentic expression and boundaries. These are part and parcel with that safety required to actually experience that. So I don't know. I probably went off on a couple tangents there. Did I answer your question though?
I think so. And it's just, I love hearing about this, because I love that intention of, you know, what is my intention? And then for most of us right away, it almost snaps us out of like, oh yeah, my intention isn't to win.
Right.
And it's not even, so he gets what he did and why it's so bad. It's more like my intention is to maintain connection. When you said that, I was like, damn, that's good. There's a reason you're doing what you're doing. You're the expert. That is, though, really beautiful, because I could then see myself saying, like, my intention here is to stay connected. And even in that connection, I would like to share why that really bothered me. And even that, your friend who might kind of be like, oh, okay, like, lower the shoulders. We're not ready for battle. Okay. And sometimes I'll say, me and my husband, we joke through things sometimes where it's like, okay, honesty time. Can I have some honest moment? He's like, okay, hang on. I'm almost like, okay, I'm ready. What do you got? And I'm like, when you did this, I felt this. And he's kind of prepared himself to hear something and not react and just go, okay. It's almost like we open up the court. And so with that intention of like, our intention here is honesty hour, or our intention here is to hear each other's perspective versus just being right and wanting to, like you said, guns a-blazing, just be heard and that's it. And I'm
so
curious,
easy to fall into it for sure. Right.
Yeah.
We want to be right. It's like human nature to want to be right. And I mean, listen, our entire educational upbringing has taught us that there is a right and a wrong. And that is actually not entirely true. Because there are many, many rights and many, many wrongs, depending on your perspective, probably 8.1 billion-ish viewpoints on that, give or take, grows every day. But really getting away from that idea of having to be right will free you from a lot of conflict, because now that opens you up to seeing a different perspective. And when you're open to hearing a different perspective and you're not so, mired in the black and white and either or, you can see that there's a lot of both and in the world, right? I was actually speaking to my cousin earlier and we're talking about, something completely unrelated, but we're talking about like the gray area. It's not black and white, but the gray area in between. And she said, like, there's a million shades of gray. And I said, oh, probably about 8.1 billion shades of gray, actually, because really everyone has their own unique perspective. And so, navigating that it's actually part of the human experience. What makes it so interesting. Like, how boring would it be if we all saw the same, like everything the same way?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
It's actually challenging us when we see someone has a different perspective. And if we can remain open instead of protecting our rightness or our righteousness, we can learn so much more from other people.
Maybe then it's like, if you want to call it conflict resolution or like everyday managing of humans, maybe it's then more about sharing than about being right. Like, when you did this is how it felt for me. And there's just such a fine line here, because there's the self-awareness, as you're talking about, outside of conflict, the general seeker path of personal development, self-awareness. So we are aware that my perspective is my perspective. However, say it's the toothpaste thing, and you kind of gather yourself, you're not freaking out. You're like, I want to maintain connection. And you realize, like, when he leaves it there, it makes me feel like he doesn't hear me. And then maybe even like sharing that. I know it may not be like right or wrong, or maybe this isn't your intention, but when I see that toothpaste lid there, it just makes me feel like those are the times that it shows me I'm being unheard or not heard. And then it's kind of explaining, like bridging the gap. Like, it's not about the toothpaste necessarily. Every time I see that, though, it makes me feel like you're not hearing me. And then even your partner hearing that starts to like remedy the situation. And then if it, the other person then has an opportunity to kind of go, toothpaste cap equals I'm not hearing her. And it's almost like, okay, well, that wasn't my intention. So you know what? Right. I'll make an effort to put that toothpaste cap on, because I didn't really realize. Not like it's such a big deal. That feels like when you're fighting. It's, why is it such a big deal? Now they're actually seeing, because you're sharing, oh, that's why it's a big deal. Because I can show my wife or I can show my partner that I'm listening to them by doing these little things. That to me feels like now we're sharing versus fighting, right?
And that moves us out of, in order to be right, we're generally making a lot of assumptions. You know what they say, when you make assumptions, you make an ass out of you and me. And that's absolutely true. Like, I don't know who came up with that, but it makes total sense, because the more we operate in assumptions, the further we are from reality. And so instead of assumptions, just throw out the assumptions and bring in some healthy curiosity, because more often than not, if you just asked your partner, if you just told them, listen, I want to have a heart to heart and connect over something that's kind of bothering me, if they are a good, loving partner, they want to make you feel more loved, right? Not because they have to, not because they're filling a void in you, but because it generally makes me happy to make other people happy too. Not because I need it to fulfill myself, but because I have an abundance to overflow. And so if I remain curious about, oh, well, that's interesting that they said or did that. I wonder what's like going on. Like, is it me is it something triggering something in me, or is there something within them going on below the surface? And this opens up the possibility of a dialogue to find out what's actually going on, both within yourself and within your partner, and talk about an opportunity for deeper, meaningful connection, as opposed to, you did this and this hurt me and I'm feeling this way, with all that tone and that hurt feelings coming out. Now we're opening a dialogue to say, like, hey, I've noticed that I'm feeling this way, and this thing is what helped me to recognize this, but it's actually not about that thing. It's about this surface. That's the surface thing. This about this other deeper thing. It's my abandonment wound, or not feeling heard, or not feeling good enough, is just kind of coming to the surface. And just even letting them know, you might not even have to ask them to stop doing that, because they might just have compassion for you. And I think that's how loving relationships typically tend to work. If my partner says something I'm doing is bothering them, I mean, I care about this human. I want to maintain deep connection. That is the intention. I want to keep the passion alive. I want to maintain open lines of communication. I never want to shut down what they're sharing with me, or, stop that connection from happening. And so it just creates an entirely different dynamic. And on the other side, not making those assumptions really frees up a lot of wasted energy, because we spend a lot of time in our imagination with those assumptions and judgments running the show about what did they mean, and what does that mean about me? And we create all of these stories that actually drain us of our energy. And so how much better is it to avoid all of that, avoid all that downward negative spiral crap, and just ask them, hey, what's going on for you? Like, I noticed this is, how does, what's going on for you? Can we talk about it? I'd love to hear, more about what's happening in your experience, whatever that is. Just opening conversations so that they feel like they can share, you feel like you can deeply connect, have a meaningful conversation with that win-win outcome in mind. And, again, this is all comes back to that maintaining the connection. If you can keep that at your core when communicating with, honestly, with anyone that you want to maintain connection with, and even if you're communicating with someone you don't want to maintain connection with, remembering your intention behind the conversation, because I think most of the time we just lose sight of that in the emotions at times. So if we can keep that core thing, that core intention in mind as we navigate, and also not feel like we have to fill every silent moment, right? We can pause, we can think, we can allow our emotions to be and process and sit with that before we respond. So I think that's another thing too, that sometimes people feel like they have to respond immediately. And it's actually okay. And if you even need longer, I don't think any loving partner would have a problem with you saying, hey, I need 5 minutes just to process this on my own so that I can come back and we can have a productive conversation. I think communicating that intention can be really powerful, right? If your partner clearly knows, hey, I want to have what might be a difficult conversation for us, because your relationship is so important. And this connection that we have is so important to me. And there's just a few things that I want to communicate with you. I mean, think about how that would soften the interaction, even if it is something difficult, right? That's really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. It just doesn't start a battle. Like a battle starts with swords being drawn or guns being drawn or whatever.
Or shields, because that sends a signal too.
Right. And that's something that I find with myself is I'll get frustrated. Like I don't know how to articulate what I'm feeling, and it's all in the moment. So like even taking a moment lets me to like unclump it, because I'm like, what am I feeling? And then how should I communicate this? And then it's all so much. But yeah, and I'll tend to shut down. Like that's when I notice I do actually need a minute in health, because I do want to be like, fuck it, I'm out of here. Like that's always what I feel. No matter what it is, I start feeling misunderstood and then I want to bolt. And so sometimes instead of bolting in sort of a way that is a numbing or an avoiding way, I will separate myself to go like, I need And I love your come back to the intention of how you want this conversation to go. Come back to the intention of what is the intention here of discussing this, of coming to an end resolution. I absolutely love that. And one thing that I found, I learned this somewhere along the way, when we're trying to resolve things, often you said this, that we want to be heard or want to like let them know our side of it. Yeah. I know that because in my perspective, I want him to hear my side.
Of course.
But when you take, say, a disagreement or drama that goes down and you at some point ask, what was that like for you? You kind of just alluded to this, like actually being open, that dissolves barriers like nothing else. And when I learned this, I was actually going through a divorce and we had a young daughter and it was dramatic. He didn't want to end it. It was this big drama and it was less than a year later. And I was learning all this stuff and we were having a clearing conversation. So this is my ex-husband. It's still close enough that things are fiery. We're fighting over the daughter and just, and I said to him, like, I'm really sorry the way that ended. Like I literally picked up in the night and left. I could have handled that better. And it was so hard for me. I'm shaking. And at the end I said, like, what was that like for you? And I felt him kind of be like, I was pissed off. I thought like you just took the easy way out and he had it. And I just stood there thinking of that intention. This intention is to clear the energy as best we can because we have a daughter together for the next forever, but at least till she's an adult, we have to always be communicating around things. So my intention was to clear. And by asking him, what was that like for you? I could tell that forever changed our relationship because it wasn't just me trying to say what he did wrong. It wasn't just us fighting. It was actually me opening up and caring. What was me leaving you like for you? Like that was probably one of the hardest things I've asked because I don't want to hear that, but I did because I wanted to clear. So just one example of a time I was really vulnerable and how that question, what was that like for you when I freaked out over the toothpaste cap? And even if he's like, that was like weird, like it came out of nowhere. And then we can kind of now level, right? I want you to hear how it was like for me, but am I prepared to hear how that was like for you? Curious if you have anything to add to that.
I mean, it's super powerful because in a way you're disarming the battle in doing so, because when you're fired up, you're not thinking clearly. When they're fired up, they're not thinking clearly. And so if you can aid the other person in coming back to a critical space by co-regulating, by holding a regulated space, allowing space for them to offload whatever it is they have to do is uncomfortable. Nobody wants to be on the shit end of that, receiving that. We get that. However, it is super productive because once they have got that out, once they feel like you actually saw them, like you actually heard them, they feel listened to, they become more open. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you go in with this intention, that is a definite way to bring things back to your intention. Because if they are arming up for battle, your intention is less likely to be achieved. And if you're doing things intentionally or unintentionally, which most of the time, probably unintentionally, just unaware, to get their defenses up, that outcome is going to be harder to achieve. And so it is absolutely, like you said, one of the hardest things to do. But if you can ask them to tell you more about how that makes them feel or how that experience is or was for them, they can actually process through those difficult emotions, right? And I mean, really allowing space for their feelings to come up and out and to be validated actually allows them to process and move through them so that they can come back to the conversation without those blinders of the survival mode, defenses up, and really actually have a meaningful conversation. Now, not everyone is ready for this. And sometimes despite your best efforts, you're going to come up against resistance. Again, it's not your responsibility for their emotions. However, there are so many things that you can do to facilitate them feeling safe to express their emotions, which we all know emotions are their energy and motion. So they're meant to be temporary. They're meant to move and flow through. So if we can facilitate that, we open up a lot of possibility for actually productive conversation on the back end. Sometimes it takes a little longer than you think, because under one emotion, there's another one, and there's another piece and another layer, and like we're like onions. But if you can sit with it long enough, you will end up creating this space where you can actually both see and hear each other clearly without all of this extraneous garbage in the way.
Mm.
And like, that's just really magical when you can come to
Mhm.
that space, because now you're, not under the labels. Maybe you're not the ex-wife and the ex-husband going to battle over co-parenting. You're just two souls connecting and seeing one another, like the authentic self, where you feel like you can just be real and raw. And it's uncomfortable, but
Mhm.
it's worth it.
Yeah. I love this. It leads me to, kind of realize in that asking, what was that like for you, or what was your experience? And you've already pointed to this, but it's like we are separate people in two completely different experiences. And
Yeah.
when we can think of any conflict from that higher observer perspective, even if you fricking hate what they're doing and you're still judging them behind the scenes because we're all works in progress, but when you can just see them as a vortex of circumstance and like their own experience, something like the toothpaste cap, I just kind of saw, what if the person goes, sweetie, why do you do that? Because you said that, like, we have a lot of judgments, we have a lot of assumptions.
Yeah.
Why do you do that? And most likely in that type of situation, I've been in a few long-term relationships with men, they'll go like, oh, I don't know. I didn't even think about it or
Yep.
something. Oh yeah, it's this habit. I have always done that since I was a kid. My mom would always be like, why do you leave and all of a sudden we go, oh, it's not that they're disrespecting me, going like, my wife
Right.
wants me to, I'll show her, I'm leaving that
Yeah.
cap off. It's
Yeah.
not like there. So then that softens you. And if you
Yeah.
explain in that circumstance, okay, I hear you. It's totally innocent. And those types of things make me feel unheard. So I'll work on that part. I'll, continue working on realizing that's not your intention. But if you could realize that it actually means a lot to me, if you don't, then right there, we're seeing two people. The guy's going, oh, I don't know. I didn't even, and I'm not trying to stereotype. I'm just saying sometimes it's those little things that they're not doing it to hate you, if it's that kind of thing often, right? But then he also realizes that it means a lot to her. And so now he'll think about it different. The
Yeah.
association is different. Like, this is one way, happy wife, happy life. This is one way my wife feels
Yeah.
nourished. I'm just going to put that cap on because it's really not that big of a deal. And maybe
Yeah.
that's a way that there's a resolution without having to battle because we're understanding each other.
Yeah. And awareness is, a huge component of change. We can't change what we're not aware of, right? We don't know what we don't know. And so if we become aware of something in a way that doesn't, create a defensive response, just simply becoming aware, oh, this actually bothers her because
Mhm.
it's bringing up these feelings, that awareness is often enough, sometimes enough to shift that, because like you said, so many times people do things like on autopilot. They're not consciously doing it. They don't have an ill intent behind it. It just is, maybe habit
Mhm.
and awareness of like, oh, this actually bothers my partner. That's not really that hard of a thing to switch. I'll do that now that I'm aware it's brought to my attention and it didn't have to get all defensive about it. That is so much more productive as far as like creating actual change. Like, I talk to my kids about this a lot. I have 4 teenage boys, and like, they focus on the problem all the time, and it makes me crazy. So I'm like, listen, the more you focus on the problem, the more you get the problem, right? And if you go in to a conversation with your brother expecting a fight, guess what you're going to get? Because you're
Mhm.
going in like this, fists up, ready to go. Well, what other way do they have to respond, right? They're going to respond in defense and probably some offense to even the playing field. And so if you just look at it from a compassionate lens, which is easier said than done and absolutely developmental. So, recognizing that teenagers' brains are not fully functioning yet, scientifically proven, until they're about 25, not fully on board. Then, as an adult, though, we can work with these things. We can start to build in this awareness and make these shifts quite simply by becoming aware of the things that we're actually doing instead of just allowing things to run on autopilot. And I
Mm.
realize humans love convenience. So it's like part of our thing. We just love things to be like easy and convenient. Hello, I do. And sometimes these things are just things that were just easy and convenient. We don't even think about them. And so just bringing them to awareness can really help us to make some shifts in these little things throughout the day that we have no meaning behind it, but other people might be taking meaning from it. And I think it's important too to we were talking about this before the show, is to make sure that we keep our fucks for the appropriate places, right? Not be handing those out to things that are unimportant. So maybe the toothpaste thing isn't actually that big of a deal, right? Maybe when you sit with it and realize I'm really feeling unheard, you're like, oh shit, that actually has nothing to do with the toothpaste thing. And yeah, sure, you could communicate to your partner that this set off this chain of events and this new awareness in myself. It's not really about that, but it's an opportunity for you to go deeper. And perhaps you realize that being unheard is actually not just about that. It has maybe nothing to do with that. That's just the latest little poke. And maybe there's a way to address that without even talking to them, because maybe like, oh, actually, maybe I just need to like set up a date night so we can actually have a conversation, because we haven't talked in a while. And this thing is just making me realize how long it's been. And so sometimes we don't even have to involve the other person. And, reserving those fucks for things that really actually are important and that need that deep conversation. Of course, if it's coming up and up and up and up, it's worth a conversation. It's not about stifling your stuff, but it's just about choosing with intention, right? Like I have engagements with my interactions with my ex where I consciously choose to just not engage with that, because I know it is not worth my time or my energy to have more interaction. I'll just leave it be, gray rock, And sometimes it needs to be discussed. And so sometimes if you just take the moment to really sit with it, like, is this really something that I need to have a conversation about? Or is this something that I just actually need to work through on my own? Will probably prevent a lot of conflicts as well, because even if you do realize at the end, well, I do actually need to have a conversation about this, think of how much more prepared you're going to be, having sat with yourself, having processed through the emotions, having recognized maybe the feelings that are coming up within you, and potentially even coming up with some potential solutions to present to your partner, and then remaining curious and open to hear their perspective, right? Think about how powerful that is, as opposed to deciding how you want this to go and being set on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just perfectly wrapped up, because it's going to be so different for every individual circumstance and every individual relationship and person, right? But these are just such good guidelines to really first and foremost think about that intention. I love, what is it, Dr. Phil? Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? It's like that comes circling around. Maybe he quoted it from someone else, but really thinking the intention is connectedness. The intention is for maybe us to both be heard, or to navigate this with as much grace and in the highest good of all, because if you're committed to somebody, if that's your path and that's your choice, I always say that to my husband. I joke, I'm like, well, I plan on being with you for the rest of time. So I don't want to be arguing about this for the next 50 years. Like, let's figure out the toothpaste thing, whether it's within me or you, because there's some things I'm like, I want to resolve though. Like I actually want to resolve, because I care about your well-being, my well-being, our relationship's well-being. Let's just, go a little bit deeper.
We're on
you
the
so
same
much.
team, right? And
Yeah, exactly.
We're on the same team can go a long ways, because in life, everything's not going to be easy. You're going to have people are going to people, life is going to life. There are going to be difficult times. Your relationship should not make those difficult times more difficult. It should make those difficult times easier to navigate, because you have someone on your team. And so remembering that you are for one another, that you're on the same team, will help you to stay aligned with that connectedness, right? To stay aligned with, it's us against the world. It's us against the problem. It's not me against you, right? Because that is a very slippery slope to a very unhealthy pattern. If it starts to become a competition or a me against you sort of situation, I have been there. I have done that. I take full responsibility for any part that I played in that. I definitely, like you said, I've not always been where I am now. It's because of the difficult conversations and the very terrible, unproductive ones that I have learned what does not work, and have adapted that and moved forward and read books and explored and tried different things to see what does work, right? It's a process of learning, and we can take wisdom from the world. We can take all of this theoretical knowledge, but honestly, if it's just knowledge in your head that you're not applying, that's pretty useless, right? So we need that experiential knowledge. And I think that's far more powerful than anything that we could just simply read in a book.
Absolutely. And with that intention in mind, like you said, you've got a partner, you're here to co-create, you're here to deal with things together, and so experimenting, and maybe it works really good for you guys that you set a timer and each of you get 5 minutes to just share what's on your heart while the other person doesn't react. Or maybe for you, it's taking a day, going inside, journaling about what's been coming up for you and your part in this. Like, you get to find that as time goes on, and each dynamic's going to be different. Some things feel bigger, some things are those little everyday irritants. And we just, with that intention in mind, it opens us right up to go like, let's just try this. And I say that to my husband all the time, like, I might not get this right, but I'm going to do my best to explain what's going on in my head. Cause sometimes he's like, are you okay? I'm like, I don't want to say no, but he goes like, okay, is it like, first of all, is it me or something like, going on? Is it like about your business, or is it about your mom, or is it about something totally different? Is it something about a past life? Like with me, he has no idea sometimes, like what, just let me know what realm we're in, Talia.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, it's nothing to do with you. It's actually like, I'm just feeling irritated. Okay. Right. So anyway, I digress, but just kind of being open to go like, I might not get this right. I'm going to try to explain what's going on. And that intention, you just nailed it. It's like, that is everything. The intention is to come together. The intention is love, resolution, happiness, us both feeling fulfilled and seen and heard in this relationship. And right there, I feel like it's like, oh, I don't have to get it all right. I don't have to be right. I'm not committed to him being wrong or whoever it is. We can just figure this out together. We can communicate. We can, meet in the middle. So I do have a question, because we've been talking a lot about romantic relationships. I did that on purpose because I get a lot of questions from clients. I've been in a marriage, for a while, and these things come up. But I always, with clients, this comes up where it's hard to communicate with the partner, or someone's into self-growth and someone's not as much into self-growth. And that can be a hard one to navigate. So are there any words for that? And then I would like to, before we wrap up, I'd like to ask also about like our children and stuff. That's a separate question I'll ask in a second. But what about when we are in this this self-growth journey? And so we have more awareness of things like triggers or emotional regulation, and maybe our partners don't. I experience this with clients that their partners maybe just kind of on their own path, but they're not really aware of the nervous system. And we don't want to be all teachy and you know what you got to do. But how do we meet sometimes when I can't use the language of triggers or trauma and maybe they don't fully understand, the partner doesn't. So is there any navigation tips there? And when you're a little bit coming from different worlds, but you're finding your way, trying to meet in the middle.
I mean, I think the same advice holds true. If you can remain curious, if you can invite them to share their perspective, if you can avoid pushing your perspective on theirs, because we are all on our journey. We're all wherever we're at on the journey. And, you can't control someone else as much as, oh my gosh, sometimes you kind of want to, right? You kind of want to be like, open your eyes, because there's this possibility that you just can't see. And I want you to see it because it's amazing. But we can't do that for them. And I mean, thank goodness that, because other people would be controlling us too, right? It's kind of a give and take sort of situation. What you can do is be you. Go first. Be the one who leads with compassion and love and curiosity, right? Leave the judgments and assumptions at the door and show them what it looks like to actually just embody these skills and this wisdom. That's the only thing that you truly can do. And you don't have to talk to them about their triggers. In fact, you probably fucking shouldn't. Probably not going to go over well at all. But when you think about it in your mind, you can observe, like, the truth is, most of what people say has nothing to do with us and everything to do with them. And so what happens there is, if someone else is triggered, you can now think, oh gosh, like they must be going through something, right? To create that emotional response. And instead of taking it on, because we know it's not ours, right? And part of this journey is getting to authentically know who we are. What is our emotions? What is inside of our bubble, so that when other people's shit tries to infringe, we're like, oh, that's not mine. I don't have to take that on. I can sit with you. I can empathize with you. I can validate that your experience is real. but I don't have to take it on. I don't have to take those emotions on. Sensitive people, empaths tend to take on other people's energies when it's really not necessary. And so being able to sort of just know where you end and other people begin is super helpful in this, and allows you to just be there with them, which is like exactly what we're talking about earlier, allowing them to be there, to share their experience, to offload their feelings, and to really process in right in front of you is the most powerful thing you can do to help them along. And this leading by example is like literally the only thing you can do. Same thing with parenting. You, unfortunately, even though you made those little people, can't control them either, nor do you want to control them, because ultimately, I think the end goal here, if we keep the intention in mind, is to raise independent, critical thinkers who know who they are, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we are trying to exert our control and our will on them, that's not working out for that long-term intention. So giving them the space to reflect back, what's this like for you? What's going on with you? The more open lines of communication you can have, the more trust and safety you're going to build into that relationship. The connection is the key with your children too. Mm-hmm. As they're growing up, what you really need is for them to trust you, to feel safe coming to you with the difficult stuff, right? Because, in society, younger and younger, because of education systems, we're attaching more to our peers than our parents, right? And if you think about teenagers, especially, it was for me, and it still continues now, we're much more concerned about what our peers think and say and want for us and trying to fit in than necessarily what our parents have done. So it's really important to keep that line of communication open, remain curious, create that safe space where you're not judging them. Right? Because if people feel judged, they don't want to share with you. People don't want to be like made to feel bad or wrong. And again, don't really think there's so much of a thing as good, bad, right, wrong. That's all judgment. But people don't want to feel that. So if they sense they might feel that, anybody, they might just stop coming to you. And with your children especially, it's so, so important that you create a safe space for them to come to you, because you are there to guide them when they run into shit. And listen, teenagers' life mission is to fuck around and find out. I am certain of it. And so what they need is for you to be that safe landing space when they find out.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I love that. That's always been my intention. My oldest is only 13, so we're just entering the teen years. And I've always we have that, we don't quite say to our younger ones this yet, but even if it's 2 a.m. and you're in a weird situation and you need help, you call. Questions later, you will not be in trouble. No matter what, even if you did something bad. And we've had a few situations where we're very late to the game with technology, because I just kind of hate 6-year-olds with iPads. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's a tough time. It's a tough thing to navigate for all parents. But she's fairly new to having a phone. And I was looking at her bill, and there was these random numbers to I'm in Canada. It was to the United States. There was one to Germany or something. And they were just a few seconds long, and I'm seeing them on her bill. And I just very calmly was hey, dude, I was looking at the bill. What happened? And she started tearing up, and she's like, we made some prank calls. And then she just told me, I'm so sorry. It was only that once. And I could see it really was only that once. And so I just kind of explained whatever. I'm so sorry. And I just took that as an opportunity. It's not the biggest deal in the world. It's not like she smashed a car or whatever. Either way, I want to be a safe space, but I kind of just decided this is a great time to practice, to show her that I just trust her, and I'll educate her on why we don't do that. And, whatever, but she's not in trouble. It's not shutting down the safe space. And there's been so many examples like that where the kids, do something where I can tell they're almost am I going to get in trouble? It's not a test, because they're not even aware as much, but they're seeing, okay, if I get in a lot of trouble for this, I'm not going to go to mom or dad next time. I'm going to hold it because I don't want to be in trouble. And yeah, it's, it is really difficult. The question I was going to ask in regards to the kids as well is, do you have any tidbits on teaching them how to be resourceful conflict navigators? So I'm thinking siblings. You have 4 boys. My 2 oldest are girls, and they will be one moment watching TV or a movie, snuggling on the couch, and the next minute they are just at each other. And I notice they have very different love languages. They're very different in astrology. They're very different in energy. And so they just butt heads like siblings do. I often take a breath and go, this is normal. They are learning skills for life. So I'm not going to expect it to that they never fight. How can I teach them? How can we be starting to teach our kids how to navigate these things when they're just, kind of going at it, and you see what's going on? And I'm not a referee. I'm here to guide. I'm here to help. I'm also not going to tell you who's right and who's wrong, because you guys, this is something you have to navigate. But any words of wisdom from a mom of 4?
Honestly, I'm still navigating it.
I'll get back to you.
As anyone else will say, the goal isn't perfection with parenting or relationships of any kind. The goal isn't perfection. We're human. We're going to make mistakes. And so the goal is actually to navigate those mistakes, our own mistakes, with grace too, right? So that we can learn from them and move forward differently. As far as, like, I say this a lot, kids don't really listen. They don't. They actually, like, almost, if you try to teach them things, they have this like counter will thing that comes in and they're like, hell no, that clearly, what do you know what you're talking? You don't even know. I'm not going to listen to you. However, they are watching all of the time. And so again, I would say the best thing that you can do here is really model it. And if you can model it out loud, which I personally find actually to be a challenge, because at this point, having practiced these tools for so long, I don't actually go from 0 to 60 and blow up in a fit of rage. Almost never. And so I have to be really, really conscious about modeling, like, oh, I'm starting to get irritated. Like, for me, like, honestly, inside my head, and my boys' therapist was like, you know what, it would be really helpful if you walked them through this process. And I'm like, okay, let me think, how's my process? What is my process? Because literally at this point, it's like, oh, that's really annoying. I'm gonna take a deep breath. Okay, I'm fine. Doesn't have to bother me. But that's not how the process started. That's how it is now after a lot of practice. And so if I were to back things up and like think about, okay, if I was starting to get irritated, I might like feel something. So maybe I could verbalize this, like, oh, I'm starting to feel like tension in my body. My chest is starting to feel constricted. I'm going to take a couple of deep breaths. And I think also, one of the really amazing tools that we have that we don't use because people misinterpret it basically, is a nice big loud sigh. Because okay, everybody else is like, holy shit, what's her deal? But what my deal is actually I'm calming myself, right? I'm not only breathing and releasing the toxic energies, but I'm also sending a verbal signal back to my brain that I'm releasing. And so if we can even just let our families know that, hey, if I'm breathing loudly like this, doesn't mean anything. It just means that I'm calming myself and bringing myself back to a regulated state. So that could be one thing that you could do, but really verbalizing the process of, I'm feeling really, upset. I'm feeling really sad. I'm feeling really frustrated. I'm going to insert your action steps, whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, whatever practice works for you. Maybe it's some deep breaths. Maybe it's a break in the other room. Maybe it's going for a walk around the block. Maybe it's a 5-minute meditation, whatever that is for you. And we're all going to have different tools in our toolbox. I actually talk about this in my book, Unstuck for Women, about building a toolbox, because even the same person will have a different need for a different tool in a different circumstance at a different time.
Absolutely.
Right. If your kid's like pulling on your pant leg at the grocery store, you probably can't do a 5-minute or 10-minute meditation to calm yourself down. You have to do something that is a little bit more accessible in that moment. Right. And then if you did have the space, maybe you would say, you know what, I really just need some time to nurture myself. But nonetheless, narrating, I guess, what you're doing to calm yourself, to process, to move through it so that you can communicate more clearly. Again, leading by example. Leading the way, showing the way, going first, giving them permission to do the same, and just really reminding them that you love them no matter what, I think is, again, what most children need. They want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be loved, they want to feel like they belong. And so reminding them that you have this unconditional love for them, reminding them that you want them to develop these critical thinking skills, these emotional intelligence skills. You want them to be able to communicate effectively and resolve their conflicts with their siblings effectively. Reminding them, when we stay focused on the problem, we get more of the problem. And when we can set our sights on a win-win solution or even just positive solutions, we're more likely to come to that outcome. So just guiding them, but not telling them what to do. And with everything, remembering that we're all doing the best that we can with the resources and understanding that we have. And it can be so easy to assume that our kids are just getting on our nerves on purpose, but that's almost never the case. I mean, they may be doing something on purpose to get our attention, but probably not to create that emotion. They probably just need our attention. They need our guidance. They need to be seen. They need to be heard. They need to feel, that they belong. And it's not about fitting in. Fitting in is like molding yourself to match the things around you. Belonging is you being yourself, fully expressed, authentically you, and people still loving and accepting you for it. Now, with any relationship, I have to say, the foundation is the relationship that you have with yourself. You cannot properly, unconditionally love someone else or unconditionally accept someone else if you don't start within, because everything is a reflection of what's within you. And so I know people are, I don't believe in unconditional love. That's because you're not experiencing it within yourself. And you need to first start by unconditionally loving and accepting yourself, as hard as that may be. Surround yourself with people who do love themselves, who do unconditionally accept themselves, because they can show you how. Because again, it's not something you can teach. It's almost like you need to just see it modeled and feel it and experience it for yourself from someone who has this overflow to give. Otherwise, it's really hard for you to give what you don't have, right? So really coming back to that foundational relationship with yourself, if you are really solid within yourself, you will be really solid in your relationships with other people too. You'll know where you end, where they begin. You'll be able to approach it with open compassion, curiosity, instead of all that muck of your own coming up and interfering with it. And you'll be able to remember those intentions and consciously choose where to focus your energy and what outcomes you want to create so that you can actually create them.
And by practicing this style of moving through conflict or these types of things, then you naturally, as you say, modeling it, and you're naturally teaching them. So I was thinking of like, literally last night, my girls had tension, and they both, when I was saying goodnight, they both were saying the same thing. The other person doesn't care. It's like, she just doesn't even care. And then the other one's going, it's like, she just doesn't even care. And I actually said to them, in reflection, I feel like you guys are both feeling similar things. So I wonder if you guys would, want to share with each other what you're feeling, because sometimes, I was saying this literally last night, I'm like, sometimes in a relationship, you're actually both feeling the same thing and that frustration. And if we get on the same page with, and then I was just thinking of our conversation here, you could guide them to share their intentions with each other, or to think, what is the intention of sitting down with your sister? Because that will do what it just did for us, which is like, oh yeah, my intention isn't just to be right and just to have them hear my point of view. The intention, they're going to say something. I know my girls, something like, I want to resolve this, or I want her to know this, or I want, whatever it is, so that they can actually think about their intention first. And sometimes by practicing this style that you're talking about, you may be able to create a safe space for them, because we are guides where, okay, girls, we're going to sit down for a moment and like, let me know how this feels. If you guys are willing to participate, why don't we talk about what happened yesterday? I'm going to kind of just stay out and just be here to love you guys. First of all, like, what's your intention with this? And almost helping them to set up a safe space, because they could just avoid it. Because again, well, these girls, they're 13 and 10. So who had the emotional awareness? Like,
nope.
I'm just learning this right now,
Yep.
So helping them to create a safe space by, as you say, first practicing this stuff, but even reminding your kids, what's your intention here of, and then that brings them aware of like, oh yeah, I want to resolve it. Not just, I want them to be in trouble. Cause I feel like that's another built-in kid trait.
Yeah,
what is
totally.
with that? I never had a sibling in the house. So like, I just see it. I'm like, you're 24/7 just committed to the other one getting in trouble for something.
It sure feels like it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, exactly. It's not actually what they're doing, but it's like, they want to figure out who's right, who's wrong. And maybe it's not so much about that, but like, what is our intention here? And I just am thinking of bringing these principles in and supporting them in that, because I went through a phase where as I started growing up, I had this like mini phase of like, guys, I'm not involved. You have to learn how to deal with this. But mom, nope, not involved. You have to learn. And then very quickly, both my husband and I were like, we don't want them to feel like they can't come to us or
Yeah.
there's no space to be heard, because sometimes they're just really upset. It's like, no, but she took my thing. And if I'm going, nope, nope, not my, very quickly we
Right.
went, nah, that's not totally where we want to land as parents. We
Yeah.
want to meet in the middle. We want to hear them, but I'm not going to referee every little thing because it is up for you guys to figure out over time. So this just feels like a valuable like middle ground there.
Yeah, it's like facilitating them,
Yeah.
right? It's like when you go to a therapist to facilitate or a mediator to facilitate a conversation where they're just there to guide you if you get off base and to remind you, because when emotions start flaring up, we tend to forget sometimes our intention. And especially as children, they're not as aware. And
Mhm.
so if there's just someone to facilitate and remind them of their intention, hey, remember your intention is this, and then stepping back again, right? Just bringing their attention to it hopefully will help them to stay focused on it long enough to share their thoughts and their feelings and come to a better place together. And I think that space just for them to be heard with one
Mhm.
another, it will create the same outcomes as we talked about earlier, where you just feel like they finally see me. I
Mhm.
feel heard, and I
Mhm.
feel like we have this deeper connection because of it.
Mhm. Yeah, we had a thing a little while ago where they were fighting and I didn't even know. I'm like, I don't know here, like how to fix this is where my head goes, right? I don't know. But we were just sitting there and they were both frustrated and like arms crossed. And I had this Burt's Bees lip stuff in my hand. I was like, okay, guys, we're going to do the talking, like I said, the talking stick. It was like the
Yeah.
Burt's Bees honesty hour. They're like, what? And I'm like, okay, Corey, you're first. You have the talking stick. We're just going to listen. Like, how are you feeling right now? And we didn't even really come to a conclusion. But the fact that that was a little bit silly, plus they both got to kind of express and we both sat there like nodding, looking them in the eye, like, we hear you, like that's tough. I noticed that even I walked away going, I don't even know if that was helpful because I kind of just didn't really have an end result. But looking back, I'm like, no, that stuff is helpful. Like
Yeah.
just giving them space to be heard, even if there's not this perfect wrap it in a bow conclusion at the end, it still shows them you can express your big feelings and we're still going to love you, which I hear you exactly said that's so important with the relationships and that safety.
Well, I think growing up in a space where, not myself, but so many of us, I mean, emotional intelligence is really a fairly new concept, and people don't really have a lot of awareness of it until, the last couple of decades. So most of us grew up not necessarily having awareness of these skills. They're not taught in school. Our parents didn't know of them either. And so we're navigating this and becoming more emotionally intelligent because it's so crucial and because of the impact that it makes in our relationships and our experiences as a human. But we can't fault people for not knowing what they didn't know. And
Yeah.
so this is really just facilitating, our children. This is us doing the generational healing and stopping the patterns here so that we don't pass it on to our next generations, right? So that they may be more emotionally intelligent, that they may feel comfortable expressing their emotions instead of being told things like, boys don't cry, or, suck it up, princess, or, stop being a big baby. Like, a lot of adults have heard these things as children.
I
And as
always
a
heard them
result,
too sensitive,
yeah,
You're
too
just too, and it
sensitive,
would shut it down.
too sensitive, too bossy, too much or too little of anything
Mhm.
really has us often, kind of quarantining off those parts of us and thinking there's something bad or wrong about ourselves, which creates a trauma response as adults where we are operating from this illusion that we're not whole,
Mhm.
because we have partitioned parts of ourselves that we have been ashamed of or embarrassed of or told that they're too much or too little, or for whatever reason we've hid them away, tucked them away. We don't want to associate with those parts, but those very parts are the ones that need our love and our acceptance the most, because they're
Mhm.
part of who we are. I like to say, like, we're a whole ass human. And
Mhm.
so in order to operate authentically, you need to be able to just fully embrace that whole ass human that you are, even those parts that you tucked away that you were told or conditioned to believe were bad or wrong, they're not. They just might, have been in front of someone else who didn't have the skill set to deal with it. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you, right? So unlearning a lot of conditioning and programming from childhood can also help us to navigate this, because then when these things are coming up, we're less likely to feel that wounding, right? That too muchness, that not enoughness, the whatever is coming up, that things that evoke a fear response. And when we can unlearn and clear that away, what's left is love. And when we operate from this space of love, then we are operating in this place of wholeness, this peace, love, joy, happiness. It is our natural state. It is our natural intended way of being. And life is just so much easier when we're operating from this place rather than fear and out of trauma and out of past, negative experiences. We deserve that freedom. Like that's, I think, the very freedom that everyone who's on a journey of any kind is seeking. The freedom to express themselves, the freedom to be authentically themselves, and to still experience this unconditional love and acceptance from another human being is, I think, a common core desire of ours. And many of us have shut that dream off, not thinking it's possible. Maybe we weren't modeled that kind of love or compassion as a child, and we just don't know what it's even like. And again, we don't know what we don't know. But if we can put ourselves in, in rooms with people who do have this experience and who can share this with us, that will help to evoke those experiences within us. And then we can let that overflow into all of our relationships, even if that's with trolls on the internet. A lot of people get upset. People be saying all kinds of crazy shit on the internet. And I chuckle at it. Like someone recently told me, I replied on one of my posts that I should just get a real job. McDonald's is hiring. And actually it reminded me a little bit of my ex. He absolutely would have said something like that. And on a regular basis does suggest that I get a quote unquote real job. But I just chuckled because I know that like this person doesn't even know me. They don't know my heart. They don't know why I'm on this mission. They don't know what I'm about or what I'm doing. It's their wounding coming up. And so I just, I choose not to let that bother me. Upon reflection, I'm like, well, this really is, that's unfortunate. I have compassion for them because happy people don't go around hurting people. Right? Yeah. Happy people spread love and joy and lift people up, gas people up, encourage people. And unhappy people allow their unhappiness to spill over. And so when I see that anywhere in the world, see someone being triggered, I recognize that it's ultimately a reflection of some deep pain within them, which allows me just to be a little bit more sensitive in my response.
Yeah, I definitely find that. Happy people don't go around trolling and criticizing everyone else,
They're hurting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I love that what you're saying about owning, the whole ass person. And it made me think of them too, like your partner too, your kids too. So if you, like you're saying, that core desire is to be authentically seen and heard and loved anyway, we have an opportunity to give that gift to somebody else by building our own emotional maturity and regulation and whatever. And then we can fully see and receive our partner. Like, even if they're going, this really bugged me, we can hold space for that and come back to that intention and come back into understanding and seeing them as their own person rather than, again, being right and just looking to like win the argument. And that's really beautiful. We give the opportunity to our kids to have big emotions and be loved anyway, which, as you say, that I swear that's the trauma healer. Like that's like the healing frequency of all. It's like, I am being who I am and you are loving me anyway. And even if just one person does that to you, or you do that to your kids, or you do that to your partner, that is the frequency that ascends us all and helps heal everything. It's very, very powerful.
It's the gift that allows us to receive back.
Right.
Right. It's like a reciprocal energy that is so uplifting. And I just look at when I'm with my partner now, as compared to maybe past relationships where it wasn't like this, I so much enjoy the giving because I actually get to experience it in the giving, I experience the receiving at the same time. And that's because there's this abundance overflowing, right? And so when I give, it's like genuinely out of the goodness of my heart, with no expectation. There's no demands. There's no need for him to reciprocate in that moment. And I think this allows us to be in a relationship where we're both giving 100%. And that 100% is going to change from day to day. It won't look the same all the time. But when we're giving at whatever our capacity is at any given point in time, we're also receiving at our capacity at any given point in time. And we'll find a harmony, right? Where some days he'll pick up the slack and some days I'll pick up the slack. And it just is more in flow, you know, and I feel like a lot of times we get stuck in this like 50-50. And I just call complete bullshit on that, because things are like, anytime someone says like, we want to be balanced. Okay. But balance is like this idea of equal and not changing. And life is not like that. Life is a flowing river. And so if we can just find things that move in harmony, where we're not like, you know, swinging too far out one way or the other, we have some mechanism to bring it back so that we can remain in this harmonious flow. That's what navigating with grace looks like, right? It's not this perfect balance where everything has to be just so, and we're doing everything we can to maintain it. We're actually expanding and creating more space for life.
Yeah. And love, you know, space for love and connection and vulnerability and healing. And it's just so, so powerful. Oh my goodness, Christy, thank you so much for everything you shared. This has just been so great. As I think of more questions, maybe I'll haul you back and we'll do another one, because this is just, it's so powerful. It goes so far. It's a self-discovery journey. It's a co-discovery journey with whoever you're navigating with, exes, children, partners, friends, bosses. You know, it comes into everywhere. That is the thing, is like connections with humans, communication, conflict. Like it's in everything, and it's in every area of our life. So really coming back, taking that self-responsibility and learning how to communicate with people and navigate these things. It's just, there's almost nothing more powerful, because it's going to really increase the quality of your life and your connection. Thank you just so much. So if anyone wants to find you, which I know you guys want to find Christy and follow along, where can we find you? What do you offer? Do you offer programs, workshops? Is it one-on-one mentorship? And where's the best place to find you?
All of the above. And I want to just also clarify too, this conversation has been about communication, but I hope that listeners will recognize here that oftentimes the problem presents as communication, but it's actually about some other root stuff underneath, right? So we often like to point at the communication, but there's that inner work that's actually creating the foundation on which that communication is built. And that's where your real power lies. So as far as finding me, you can find all of my things. I have a lot of things, and I'll share a couple of those for some ideas on my website at coachchristyholt.com. I have a podcast called Create Your Happy. And this current season, I am speaking about all things relationship. So we probably touched on briefly the topics of probably most of the season in some way, shape, or form today, about diving deeper into different relationship topics. Spoiler alert, it is really about the relationship that you have with yourself, because you cannot control or change another person, but you can control or change yourself. And so that is where the practical action steps are coming in to help you to take back your power and stand in your power. I also have a couple of books out. I have Swery meditations that are free. I have Swery coloring books. I have online courses to help you build the foundations for healthy, happy, loving relationships. And I have one-to-one mentorship in a couple of different containers and a group mentorship program as well. So honestly, a variety of price points, starting from free resources all the way up, all designed to help you create those healthy, loving relationships that make you truly fucking happy, because that is what you deserve.
Thank you so much. I've actually created an activity and coloring book as well. I don't know if I've connected with another adult who's done like a coloring book. It's super fun. Anyways, I can see your books behind you, and they just look they look so fun. I will put all the links below. Make sure to go find Christy. I'll put her website and everything that was mentioned. Are you on social media as well?
Yes, I am pretty much on all of the things.
All the places.
I mainly hang out on Facebook for now. I mean, who knows? Things be always changing, but I am largely on Facebook. That is where I put the majority of my extra little thoughts and ideas. And I am on TikTok and Instagram and Pinterest and YouTube and all the things. But yes, absolutely. Follow me, find me wherever you hang out. I would be happy to meet you there.
Awesome. Thank you again, Christy. This has just been so amazing. Everybody check the show notes and follow along because there's so much here to learn. And it's just such medicine that you provide. So thank you so much for teaching what you teach and going through everything you've been through to come to this place, because that's what makes the best teachers, are the people that have fucking walked the path and continue to walk the path. And I see that in you, my friend. You are definitely knee deep in your own work and in the journey. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I genuinely hope that it helped you in your life and it inspired you. If you want to find more from me and my guests, make sure to check the link in the show notes. Find us on Instagram, find us on Facebook. I am at Talia Joy Manifestation. Make sure to take a screenshot that you're listening to the show. Come and tag us over on Instagram. Let us know your takeaways. We love to hear about people manifesting their dream lives. So make sure to check the link in the show notes. There are also some free goodies down there for you. I'll see you in the next episode.